Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Quantum Ladder Podcast. We are discussing, is a utopian society possible? A society where everybody shares resources, we share information, we share knowledge, wealth, food. Is such a thing possible? A gentleman in the 70s by the name of Jacque Fresco theorized that this could be possible, and he started the Venus Project. And with the advent of some recent technologies, we're a lot closer than you might think. We're also going to discuss cities of the future, what they look like, and what are some actual plans that are going into place right now. Welcome to the Utopian Society of the Future. This is Quantum Ladder Podcast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Quantum Ladder Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good friend and co-host, Mr. Marquise Williams.
What's up, everybody? Let's do this. This is going to be a freaking awesome show. It's very well talked about even in my circles. Privately, people have been like, "Hey, this is going to be so good. I'm so excited." So this is going to be great. I'm excited today. I'm really excited again.
Yeah, of course. That's the whole purpose of why we do this and why we love doing it. And, you talk about the idea of a utopian society. It seems almost science fiction, right? Like, sure, it's great in a novel or in movies, but, humanity doesn't work that way. But does it have to be like that? Is there a way we can, in fact, get along and share resources? And hey, if we just keep doing what we're doing, we're going to have no damn choice because there's going to be nothing left to share if we don't. Yeah. So we may be forced into this utopia because our ignorance is taking us the other way. But either way you look at it, a gentleman like Jacque Fresco in the 70s was talking about this idea of sharing resources and we can all get along and there shouldn't be hunger and people that aren't educated. If you pool your resources, everybody has everything. And it seemed pretty pie in the sky in the 70s because he was talking about all the stuff that would need to be invented. You'd need computer interfaces and, AI and all this stuff that doesn't exist in the 70s, but it does now. And so we're a lot closer to his ideals than ever before. And I know, Marquise, you're a big fan of the zeitgeist movement, the movies, and just Jacque Fresco as a whole.
To be honest with you, my entire worldview at a very young age, this is like a very old idea. This isn't a new thing. There's actually a Larry King interview, which we'll talk about, after the show on the Patreon side of things. That is, I highly recommend. I think I'll put it in the comment section of the video, of course, so you guys can check it out yourself. But there's an entire Larry King video interview where it's in like the 90s. This is a very old idea. Jacque Fresco has been working on for quite some time. And it shaped me as a kid, my thinking about the world and what's possible and what I think we as a civilization should be looking forward to in terms of how we should be, how we should just be. How do we make things better? How do we get to that futuristic, type 1 civilization that I envision, that futurists talk about all the time, and not the dystopian version of, what people see in sci-fi movies and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's great stuff.
And for anybody at home who's not familiar with the Venus Project or Jacque Fresco, you might recognize him when you see a picture of him. We've got a short little video clip here just to get us started on today's topic. We're going to cover what they believe, what the ideals and goals were, what's actually happened, where we're at now, and moving forward, what cities of the future are going to look like. We have some examples, lots of video clips today, so you guys are in for a treat. But for those of you who are not familiar with the Venus Project, check it out. Welcome to a visionary journey that transcends the boundaries of conventional thinking. In a world seeking solutions, one name stands out as a beacon of innovation. Jacque Fresco, a futurist and dreamer, envisioned a world where technology and human ingenuity harmonize to create a global civilization free from scarcity and strife. His brainchild, the Venus Project, is a bold exploration of what our future could be. Imagine a world where cities are not just concrete jungles, but thriving ecosystems that work in harmony with nature. The Venus Project proposes sustainable living through cutting-edge technology, eco-friendly architecture, and a commitment to preserving our planet for generations to come. Jacque Fresco believed in a departure from the outdated monetary system, instead advocating for a resource-based economy. In this vision, wealth is measured not by currency, but by access to education, healthcare, and a high quality of life for all. As we delve into the realms of innovation, the Venus Project introduces us to a world where advanced technology is harnessed for the betterment of humanity. Automated systems, artificial intelligence, and holistic design create an environment that maximizes efficiency and minimizes waste. In the future, technology will free us to pursue our passions, fostering creativity and individuality. With a keen eye on addressing global challenges, the Venus Project confronts issues like poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation head-on. Fresco's vision challenges us to think beyond the status quo, encouraging a shift towards a more compassionate and sustainable world. In conclusion, the Venus Project with Jacque Fresco is more than a vision. It's a call to action. As we stand at the threshold of possibility, let us embrace this daring dream of a world where cooperation triumphs over competition, where technology serves humanity, and where a brighter future is not just a dream, but a shared reality. Join us in this transformative journey as we explore the Venus Project and the legacy of Jacque Fresco. Together, let's shape a future that transcends the limits of today and ushers in a new era of human potential.
Fantastic. That was freaking awesome. I love that video. I love that video.
Thanks,
that was
buddy.
awesome.
There is the 101 on Jacque Fresco and the Venus Project. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term utopian society, by definition, a utopian society is an ideal and perfect society with harmonious living conditions, social equality, and overall well-being. So it's kind of like what we all want, but it's something that we certainly don't have on this planet. There is still a huge divide between have and have not, even when it comes to, hunger and those that are fed. That's a massive divide still, and we think we're civilized. I know this is something Jacques commented on years ago. It's like, we're not civilized because look how we still behave generally as a species. Now, a lot of us make strong efforts every day. We're self-realized people. We do what we can, but it's going to be more than just a few individuals, right? It needs to be collective. Everybody needs to agree that it's for the betterment. And that's where the motivation comes from, I think, right? If you can't motivate people, people will go to war and die for their brothers if the motivation is correct. Right. So, we're willing to do a lot of things and make a lot of changes if we are so motivated, right? And I think finding out what's going to make people sort of tick and get there is the most important.
Yeah, I will say there's a concept that when we get to the point in this conversation, called socio-cyber engineering that I really want to talk about a little bit about, because I think that would kind of encapsulate what is how we can get to that point. Like, how do we design society, structure it in a way that people will be able to kind of align or move towards that direction in terms of their thinking and how they see the world, and how they see what civilization is or could be. How do we get to that point? And the term that you're going to hear that pretty much gives you the full idea is socio-cyber engineering. We'll talk about that though when the time comes.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, more now than ever, we have these tools at our disposal. We can use AI, like you say, to cyber engineer solutions, models, potential theories, things that we wouldn't think of, or, could take many, many years for somebody to just get that little spark of inspiration to say, hey, that's a good idea. We can force the wheel to turn rather than just waiting for inspiration to strike one of us, right? We actually have the fate of that in our hands. So I got a little clip here on Jacques in terms of cities of the future, because essentially that's where we're going. We are civilized people. So we don't just need to re-engineer how we behave with each other. We need to re-engineer society. And that involves the cities we live and work in, how we interact with them. There are some examples we'll show later on. There's cities that are going to be like vehicleless cities because they don't need them. They have other, again, this is who knows how far in the future. but certainly closer now than ever before. But let's
Mm.
see what Jacque's got to say about cities of the future.
The cities of the future are circular, not because I like circles. It's because you only have to design one segment of the system and then reproduce it in pie-shaped sectors, and that would be the most economical way. When you build suburbia, it's spread out, and you have to travel one way to the dentist, the other way for shopping, another way to the doctor. The system is self-contained. There are wind generators. All the rooftops are solar generated. All of the garbage and waste is recycled under the ground, underneath these roadways. All of the roadways contain piping running up and back, and we use all that hot water to operate the air conditioning and the needs of the city. Now these are where the residential district is. If you work in the medical center, you can live here if you choose to. So this is essentially a collection of variations in houses. Your house will vary to suit your needs.
Yeah, this is fantastic. So of course I have my thoughts about this, right? So when I first found out about this idea, I was so excited about it. I talked to people, talked to everybody. Like, what, did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? Just to see how people thought about it and what their perspectives were. And the biggest resistance to this idea is the idea of minimalism, right? The idea that we might live in a future where there's a quote that people have been posting all over X or Twitter, whatever, that says, and they've been saying this for a while, you will have what is it? You have everything, but you will own nothing, or something like that. I can't think of the quote exactly, but essentially, you'll own nothing and be happy. I think that's what it is. You'll own nothing and be happy. People really don't like that idea. They think of the Orwellian, the idea of like 1980, where people are like, they're under this dictatorial regime that pretty much dictates how you live your life and think and feel, and there's thought crime, and it's kind of, in all honesty, it's a bit short-sighted and primitive in thinking, sorry to say, because the reality is that there's so much more to what's possible than the dystopian future of not having what you want. You can have what you want. As a matter of fact, there was this new scientific discovery with AI where they can create materials in the moment. They can create something through 3D printing, and you can essentially give it a prompt. I want to have this thing, this material. It's an iPhone or a shoes or whatever. And it will create that thing for you and have it mailed to your home. This is a potential. This is not what's happening now. But they have the manufacturing process in play where scientists are using it to create new materials. Google DeepMind, I had to pull this up here, has an AI tool that's known as, it's got this, they call it genome, graph networks for materials exploration. And it's been used to predict the structures of 2.2 million new materials, and 700 of those have been used in the lab. They've made them, 700 of them. 380,000 of them are the most stable, and they're trying to use them to synthesize new material. So they can do this, and they can do this quickly as well. Discover new things, make new things, and make them on cue. You can just ask for them. So it's not that there's a future where you don't get what you want. The future is you get everything you want on demand just by asking for it. It's prompt engineering of everything that you want. That's how I see things versus the dystopian 1984 Orwellian,
Yeah.
future.
Yeah, and that's an issue too with intellectual property. Again, with 3D printing, that's one of the I think it was MIT or some research group that said one of the biggest dangers in the future we have to watch out for. One was the abuse of AI, letting it get out of hand, and the other was 3D printing on demand, because essentially people can 3D print weaponry. You can 3D print somebody's phone, make an exact copy of it. Now you can counterfeit that much easier. The big companies spend millions and millions, billions collectively, fighting counterfeit and copies and fakes, basically, right? Nobody wants to go buy a fake iPhone that's almost the same, but not. And then it gets like foggy behind the glass because it's not, it's not made the same way. Well, so I mean, there are issues with that as a whole, the way we function now, and we'll get into this, but The
Yep.
problem with this utopian society, the only thing that needs to change is us, and we're the ones slowing that down, because
That
how we function now in a corporate world, it's not help your company collaborate, share information. It's no, this is our intellectual property. It's only for us, and we could charge what we want. And so a lot of research is overlooked because it's like, even when we interview people or talk about government or military, and it would be so much easier if they just gave each other information instead of fight. But everybody
yeah.
has this attitude of not my job. I don't have a need to know. It might help them, but that's not my job to do that. So why would I do that? Right. And in fact, you could even be reprimanded for doing too much or more than you're
Yeah.
supposed to, just because the system says you're on this team, you do this and that only. You don't think outside the box. You're not allowed to open collaboration without everybody's agreement on that. Right. And I
Yeah.
know in the world of science, there's a lot more cooperation where one scientist could call another across the planet and say, hey, I just read your paper. I'm doing some stuff. I'm going to send you what I've been working on. Like, there's no fear that they're going to lose it. I mean, you still have backups if this is your work, but they could still be going, oh, you know what? I'm trying to get a Nobel Prize out of this. I'm not going to share with
Yeah.
anybody or collaborate. But they seem to be driven more with this intent of helping. And it's only good if everybody uses it, or if we can make something of it. Let's work together. And I think the corporations just don't function like that, right? They are sociopathic in the way that they exist.
Oh
If
yeah.
you do what they tell you to do, they just replace you. They don't care about benefits or your families or anything else. They replace the heads of their companies just as fast. Like, you become the CEO of a company, you don't produce stock prices that go up, you're done. Like, it's a machine that chews up and spits everybody out. And at some point, it just doesn't work in the future. You have a workforce that's unhappy, a management force that's unhappy. Even the people with money aren't happy. So clearly it's not the way to get what we're looking
Yeah.
for. It's gotta be something else. But it feels like it could be a ways off, not because the technology is not there, but because people are not mature enough to realize this. And greed is a major factor.
That's actually kind of the one of the other issues. There's a lot of issues, but it's incentives, right? What is the incentive today versus what could be the incentive for this potential future? If we live as a society off the incentive of getting one up, of competition versus collaboration, and little side note here, excuse my ADHD, but my biggest frustration with gaming today is that it used to be that people would create video games and they'd be like, man, this is a great story. They're great actors, great people in there, great stories, all that stuff. And now, like, there would be an update, and the update would fix problems, but also you get this new game, like game 1, game 2, game 3. It'd be awesome stuff. Now, they really speed up the process of updating things. And the greatest thing you can do today is play a PvP game. The biggest game in the world is Fortnite. Terrible, sucks. All you do is go around shooting each other. That's it. And the greatest aspiration for the next update is a skin. Right now, my kids are playing this Fortnite, and they're like, oh, can we get the Lego skin? And I'm like, this is the big update for a video. Like, this is it.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. But that is the nature of our incentive system today. It's to get one up on someone else. And they've even gamified it, where now the most fun you can have is by getting one up on somebody else versus collaborating with people towards some kind of a unified goal. Now, people can do that, but they still do it against each other. So, as you mentioned about corporations, yeah, corporations do have massive collaborations. However, they're collaborations against other corporations versus for the greater good, where they can share data and information. They have to worry about corporate espionage and stealing intellectual property, again, versus that ultimate aim of enhancing the human experience and civilization as a whole. We're competing versus that, and it stifles innovation. It really hinders our progress as a civilization, and it causes more problems than it creates. Yes, we've created a lot of great things, but we could do so much more faster if we actually work together versus what we have today. It's honestly ridiculous. It's kind of stupid. It's kind of stupid and primitive. Again, primitive. I've used that word a lot. Sorry, my keyboard's.
That's okay. And there are some areas that the Venus Project itself has pointed out that they need to see either worked on, or they want to work on themselves. So they call this their Venus evolution. So the circular economy, again, that's Like, it's the idea of sort of the waste going out one way, the heated pipes being used to do something else. It's everything is in a circle. There's less waste, everything's collaborative, everybody helps. The steady state economy, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, degrowth, and something they call game B. And then basically you plan an all-inclusive, holistic, and systems-oriented at scale. So you plan to have an economy where everything is inclusive. It has a holistic research base to it in the terms of how do we respect the environment with this. And that will work at regardless of your scale. Because it is holistic in nature, it takes care of all the things it needs to. It considers everything that's important in that. Doesn't matter if it grows or not, because it is proper. So again, and planning for that is long-term, the ability to withstand and adapt to change. Everything is going to change, especially in the economy and the sort of tech world we have moving forward. Nothing will be the same. So anything you're going to put in place needs to have the ability to adapt and change, balance the population. So instead of having cities with 20 million people and then little towns with 400 people, maybe there's a better way to balance that out, make it advantageous. Where before cities were where you had to go if you wanted to work, in the future, that may not be the case. You may not need to be so densely populated. Restore and enhance our natural biosystems, which we've done a lot of damage to. Functioning design directed by sustainability criteria, again, focusing on biofuels, less waste. What do you do with that waste? Can it be turned into energy? The radical innovations, essentially, that nobody was talking about in the 70s. And they even have a couple global risks that they could see. Some are what they call anthropogenic, meaning within our control, and some are none. So, for example, scenarios of anthropogenic could be misuse or abuse of AI, nuclear war, runaway technologies. Again, that could be an AI thing where it gets out of hand and we can't stop it, or just the breakdown of our planet and ecosystem. And then non-anthropogenic would be plagues or pandemics, super volcanoes, comets, solar flares, and even contact with extraterrestrial life.
Interesting, huh? Yeah, interesting.
That definitely throws a wrench into the plans of things. If we find out aliens are real and they're here, many of us believe, but there's to date nobody that can really provide that golden egg of proof, right?
Yeah. I mean, side note again, Neil deGrasse was recently had an interview with News Nation where he was calling out people who are claiming that non-human intelligences are a thing, given that the new bill just got essentially just gutted. They gutted it. The new bill was supposed to say, hey, if there's any information that these corporations have, that these private aerospace industries have about non-human intelligences, including their technology, the government needs to know about that. The people need to know about that. And there's a process to make that stuff available. And they gutted it. Like, some people go like, yeah, we're not going to tell you anything. First of all, if you don't believe, you might want to pay attention to what's being fought against there. There's obviously something there. And secondly, it's ironic to me that it's not being recognized by the scientific community, some of people in the scientific community, that there's clearly a cover-up of some kind of technology that could, at the very least, revolutionize how we do things today. So it's interesting that the Venus, I didn't know that they were open to ET life as much as they are until recently, when I started studying it back into it again. A decade ago, they did mention the idea of aliens. They said aliens and extraterrestrials. That was a thought back then, and that they were open to that, but they didn't believe it. They're very cautious of religious institutions, not religion, but religious institutions, and how they've been used against essentially people, and so forth. And so, to me, this whole idea, those solutions that they're trying to find problems to, they can be found better if we geared society towards problem solving versus bickering and fighting over policy and political ideals, which kind of, again, it just seems so barbaric. It's almost like, we might as well go back to caveman times and do things the way we used to. How far back are we going to go? We got to break the system we have today if we want to get anywhere further. It's got us here. It's time to move on.
Yeah, but that's a perfect example of how the government and the sort of industrial complex works. Government passed a bill saying, if you have anything, you need to give it to us. And they just said, no. Not going to happen. Screw you. No. We paid for your campaign. We're connected with so-and-so or whatever union or body of people that give them strength and bravado. They tell you, you can pound salt, go to hell. We're not giving it to you. So if we're talking about, hey, all these technologies are within our grasp, this type of society is possible. The issue is you still have a society and a governing system where the government can demand things. If the government demanded something from you or I and we told them to go to hell, what would happen to us? They just
Well,
take all your stuff, put your ass in jail, and that's the end of it.
yeah,
But a
yeah.
corporation is a
Or
whole
the
different
military
story, and
or
it gets
general.
greasy
Yeah.
and underground and everything else. And they can flat out tell them to beat it. Or they can say, yeah, we'll get it to you, but it's going to take us 15 years because we have to, intellectual property. We still have
Yeah.
patented development. They have the best lawyers on the face of the earth who can just tie stuff up in red tape and nothing ever gets done, and you see that even from a like a city-based level. You'll have a city council. They won't fix the roads because if they do, they go over budget. They don't get reelected. But if they, you know what I mean? It's like the best thing would be spend twice the budget and get it
Yeah,
done,
yeah,
because
yeah.
literally we're spending patches for the same amount of money or more, and we still don't have a new road. So like, let's rip the Band-Aid off. Let's not tear it off slowly. But nobody wants to be the mayor or the city councilor that proposed blowing the fiscal budget. And now everybody points at that person, ostracizes that person. They're not a good politician. So there's no incentive. There's no benefit to anybody in these positions to really be a go-getter. Like if you know anybody who works for the government, like the federal government doing like a mundane job, they're like robots. Don't think outside the box. You don't have new ideas. There are no new ideas. You just do with the same stuff you've been doing every day for the last 30 years, right? It's not, it is not a group of people that welcomes fresh new insights and thinking. Like you're not trained to be that way. And if we want to get to a society where we're cooperating and doing all this stuff, we're going to have to get that way. It's the only way it's going to work,
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like that diabetes medication, that the insulin, that was like, I don't even know, I can't even remember the ridiculous percentage that it was increased, the value was increased by, to sell to people that needed to live. And they're like, well, that's just the market. That's just the way that we, I saw an interview with a guy that was also producing these medicines or vaccines or whatever. I think it was medicines. And he was like, he was making a case for why, because of the system we live in, the capitalist system we live in, it's good to, and that's actually what the Venus Project and Zeitgeist movement talk about, the incentives, to be some of the most valued positions in today's society are the ones that cause the most damage to not only like us, humanity, but the entire planet we live on. Like global, like forget about global warming and climate change. Let's talk about pollution, oil spills, and people dumping chemicals in local water supplies, to corporations doing this to help to get rid of waste. And because they do it because it's cheaper to pay the fine for dumping the waste in the local water supply than it would be to correctly recycle the waste or to get rid of it. That's the incentive. And by the way, those corporations, those CEOs, they're the ones people look up to and aspire to be like. And so our system today, it's just so backwards in terms of not only progress, but like sustaining life on this planet, that we got to do something to change it before we all get snuffed out by our own, hand.
Yeah. You mentioned problem solvers. I got a clip here from Jacque Fresco on just that, problem solvers.
I would say the most important thing in all the films that we're making is training people to become problem solvers. That's the most important of all the lectures. I'm not talking about private problem solving. So when I use the term problem solving, corporate problems are not social problems. They benefit the corporation. That is not the problem solving I'm talking about. The problem solving I'm talking about is man's relationship to the environment and what the environment produces to enable man to survive. Not self-centered problem solving. I'm talking about global problem solving. If the climate is not conducive to growing food, you can't grow food unless you make glass buildings with controlled climate. The schools of the future will only be devoted to problem solving. Going to school, getting an education in defense systems or tactical engineering is not problem solving necessarily. It's problem solving for corporations, problem solving for the Defense Department, problem solving for individual survival. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about global survival of all people. That's what I'm talking about. War is not problem solving. War is putting another nation down, eliminating the opposition. Debate is trying to win, which is not problem solving. Problem solving is discussion, not debate, where you say something, I listen, and we go up and back. And I walk away with a little more knowledge, you walk away.
So that's essentially it, right? It's the corporations, you know, spending money on defense is not problem solving. Some people might call it problem prevention, but the problem is the fact that you even need an army in the first place. The fact that somebody wants to attack or kill you, and you need to be prepared for that. That is the fundamental issue. All of that disappears. And think about how much money is spent on the planet in just defense.
Yeah.
Like it's trillions and trillions of dollars. I'm just saying, it's not like we don't have the means to do these radical things in the future. It's a matter of priority. We have the money. We just don't have the motivation or the inspiration or the wanting to do it for whatever reason. There's a myriad of reasons. It's very complex. But certainly the people that we have in charge of governing us right now don't necessarily have our best, you know, what's best for us at heart, I should say.
You know, there's a documentary called Corporation. Freaking awesome documentary. It essentially goes over the nature of corporate influence on like the development of the human being, like a person. So not just like, oh, can a corporation like pay for a lobbyist to have a certain policy implemented so that they can profit more in a certain region, but even more terrifying would be, how do we manipulate the minds of everyone from like birth until the day they die? How do we manipulate them? How do we make the entire like thinking of the world the way that we want it to be, to maximize profit and to be able to get what we want no matter what it is? And that's scary. You gotta think about this. This is the idea of literally engineering the thought of man. People talk about Orwellian societies where things are, you know, controlled and everything like that, but we literally live in what would kind of be like a mirror of the society, but it's done differently because corporations are now influencing people, making them believe they have choice, giving them the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
But really, this is what our, you know, we talked about the last episode, or not the last one, but the one before. We talked about, you know, human nature versus nurture, where the great thinkers were talking about how you think that the thought that you have now is yours, that you came up with it, but you didn't. You have, this is an amalgamation of experiences and information you've taken in that you've chosen to pull from, and you've given it this output right now. It's not you. It's not a natural evolution of just being. It is a construct that's made by the civilization you live in, specifically the culture and the people you live around. And so they've literally controlled the entire process. The cartoons that kids watch, the commercials that you watch, the signs that you see on the road. There's an entire psychological field called industrial psychology. Please look into that. It's the highest form of psychology, one of the highest forms of psychology you can get into. And it's literally, how do we manipulate people in the work environment? Not for what's best for everyone, but for what's best for the corporation, for the business, not the small, but like big business, to create, again, the thought of people that keeps them in a way that we can manipulate them at any point. And the crazy thing to me is that people believe like, oh, I'm Republican or Democrat. You think it's that you believe those things, but really you've been given the illusion of choice, and usually only two. And nobody likes either one of them. Like, people hate both of them equally. Like, I don't know. I get kind of, it's kind of amusing, but also terrifying.
It's the concept at Costco. If you give people too much choice, they struggle. That's why Costco has like 2 flavors of chips. You get barbecue or regular. Yeah. They don't give you 17 because people are like, oh, I don't know. You would think they would buy more because you have more. No, but there's psychology that says people are given an option of 2, maybe 3 at most. They can make a decision because they're like, well, I don't like honey garlic. Definitely don't like salt and vinegar. I guess it's sour cream and onion. You know, like, process of elimination helps people to land on something. And the math shows that more often than not, they take more product than they would with having all that selection. Some people find it overwhelming. It's like country folk don't like going to the city because the traffic, the lights are weird. It's like you make a split-second decision wrong, somebody could hit you, you could hit somebody. So they don't like that. Whereas when you make it simple based on how people are programmed or what they're used to, then they find it easier. And, you know, we talk about being civilized people. Let's watch this quick clip here from Jacque on we think we're civilized. But again, when you look at those basic examples, we quickly realize that we are not civilized, not at all, especially the way, like you said, the manipulation starts right from a young age. Commercials, marketing, toys, advertisements, we're bombarded with this stuff and we don't even realize it, you know. But here's Jacque's opinions on us being not civilized.
Then they tell you at least we're civilized. No way. It's an ongoing process. A civilized country would not have war, crime, prisons, police. All those are byproducts of an insufficient culture. An insufficient culture makes laws. All man-made laws, I should say most of them, are worthless. When we sign treaties with other countries, if that treaty doesn't serve our interests, we will violate it. So treaties and laws are attempts made to control human behavior. The only laws that really count is natural law. If you don't eat nutritious food, get enough sleep, no matter what your philosophy is, you get sick. So if you have a population larger than that which the area can support, you'll have starvation and territorial disputes. As long as you have a population that coincides with the carrying capacity of the earth, you'll be able to get on. As long as you use science and technology and make all its findings available without patents, free of charge to all the nations of the world. When you own patents on nutrition, drugs, medical devices, you hurt people. So the future, every human being will live very well. I'm not talking about a handout society. I think that what the Venus Project proposes is a society where everyone will live better than the wealthiest people today. Everyone. Now, is that possible? Let me give you an example. The middle-class American today, or the middle-class person in any advanced society, lives better than kings. They have air conditioning in their car. They have communications in their car, telephones. They fly and fly. Even the Arabs used to think of a magic carpet. The guy sat on the couch and they flew around and they thought that was fantastic. But they never told you when it rained, the carpet got soaked, everybody got wet, or you had to go to the washroom. What did you do in the magic carpet? Now you have airplanes with television in the airplanes. Even the magic carpet was considered, oh, that's too far out. Nothing's too far out. Anything a person can conceive of can be built. So you have to, instead of making soldiers, which are killing machines, I hope I'm getting to a lot of soldiers. They are killing machines. We would educate soldiers to become problem solvers, send them to universities free of charge, so they learn how to solve problems rather than kill. When you kill, you build hatred for the future. You kill children, you killed adults, and that nation that you did all the killing in doesn't have pleasant associations with our nation. The Jewish and Arab situation, Palestinian problem will go on and on and on until the earth is declared common heritage. And all the artificial boundaries that separate people will be dissolved. And when all people are brought up together, then you have the brotherhood of humanity.
I've got to mention just real quick because my mind goes immediately here. So there are two things I want to mention here. Again, I'm big into storytelling. Obviously, you guys know this by now. There were two things that come to my mind with what a lot of things, but two things that I want to bring up. The Last of Us video game. Guys, listen, forget about the fact that it's a game. It's a story. It's a story that couldn't be told any better. But there's two of them. The second one is essentially about revenge and why revenge is bad. People always say things like, oh, well, if you hurt me, I hurt you. Or if somebody does something to you, you should do something back to them or do it worse. Actually, as a matter of fact, some people believe in this world that if somebody hurts you, you hurt them back 10 times more than they hurt you. So they never do it again. So they can't hurt you again. The Ender's Game, right? In the Ender's Game, the aliens come here. They because there's water. They didn't know there was population here. They start fighting us. We fight back. They leave because we won. But we go follow them to kill them all. Why? Because we want to make sure they never do it again. They had no intention of doing it in the first place. They just needed resources. And so out of that necessity, they came here, we fought. There was it's more confusing than just, oh, they're bad and we're good. It's more confusing than that. Every wars today, it's a lot of that is about taking, right? Terrorism, a lot of terrorists, and this is a very controversial thing to say, but a lot of terrorists are not terrorists because they just like bad people. Like, oh, you know what? They're just designed to be evil. People are terrorists a lot of times because something bad has happened to those people get them to the point where they want to do something terrible to fight back against an oppressive force or whatever. And so the only power they have is through terrorism. They don't have money and the kind of power that entire countries have. So they fight back in the ways they can. But no matter what happens, what is the ultimate result of that? It's more carnage, chaos, violence, and ultimately death. And I think what a lot of people, like, for example, what we talked about, they talk about trauma and how, dealing with those traumas, if you think about this societally, are difficult, let alone dealing with them individually. If we keep functioning as a society off of, we have to hurt people to get them to stop hurting, we're just going to perpetuate the pain, violence, and so forth. So I'm 100% behind that. My belief system is very much aligned with this idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the second half of the show, we'll get to the points of sort of government, economic structure, education, knowledge sharing, resource-based economy. What does that all look like? Very cool stuff. Any final thoughts before we roll our 5-minute break?
No, I've got plenty of thoughts, but I'll save them because I'm sure there's going to be more we got to talk about.
Okay, cool. Well, everybody refill those drinks and grab a snack or do whatever you got to do. If you got them, smoke them, whatever. We'll see you back here in 5 minutes. And we are back with the second half of Quantum Ladder Podcast. Today we're talking about the Venus Project, Jacque Fresco, and utopian society, cities of the future, what would need to change. So far, we've sort of discussed the idea behind it, definitely the need behind it, some of the issues with government, and there's a few other things we want to cover here. So let's talk governing styles. What are we doing currently? What do we need to do differently? I mean, that's a big question, obviously, but what we're doing right now doesn't seem to be serving the needs of the people, which is what I thought government was supposed to do in the first place. Now, yes, government serves a function. Without government, there would be anarchy per se. We're all conditioned to be governable, so to speak. So it's not as easy as just saying, oh, no more government. But are there better ways of doing it? What do you think on the whole governing style?
Oh my gosh. So this is a great question, right? So I am a believer, and I mentioned this before, that I'm a believer in systems theory, systems thinking. And again, I mean, I understand it as much as somebody who reads a bunch of stuff about anything understands anything. But ultimately, the systems thinking is just how do we think about something in a systematic way. That is the most efficient way to do that thing. So you don't think of things like, listen, and we talked about this, we talked about this privately. If your arm was like, hey, the cells in your arm are like, hey, listen, we need to be able to coagulate and fix that. You got to cut. We got to heal that. So let's produce more cells, whatever. I'm like, I would do that, but the leg doesn't actually have a good relationship with the arm. So I think that we're going to have to keep those resources here because it doesn't really believe in the same things the leg believes in. That's like walking and stuff. So we're going to have to cut that off. And then they fought against each body part or element of your body or whatever is fighting against each other because of different belief systems. How long before you die? You die. Forget about losing a limb. You're going to die because your body's not doing what it needs to do efficiently. It's doing it based off of beliefs and ideas. And so it's all about efficiency, not about belief and about different ideals. What is the most efficient way to run society based off of data, facts, the scientific method versus what you feel and think and want to be true? That's what I just feel like we're doing it. I was listening to somebody say something like, oh, we can't give kids school lunch. It's like, what? You don't want to feed children? No, because if we do that, then they're not going to be it's going to make them think that things are handed to them. They're children.
So you shouldn't breastfeed a baby either because you don't want that kid taking it for granted.
I can't. The argument was so insanely evil. Like, if you were to pick an evil villain out of a cartoon and put them in government, a lot of people are like, they remind me like evil villains in a cartoon. It's like, you can't be serious. So that's you can't make decisions based off of like these ridiculously insane ideas about what you believe is true. The fact of the matter is that a child that is fed and has proper nutrition is going to perform and learn better, period. There's no denying. It's a fact, right? And those are the ways that we should make decisions versus, oh, I think they need to be tougher, and like, suffer a little bit because that's probably a better way to live life than actually being provided for as a child. Apply that to everything in our system. There's a lot of things that, like, whether it be feeding the homeless, alleviating poverty. What is it? The main driving factor of all crime? Poverty.
Yeah.
Lack of economic, security. Like, these are not like ideas or belief systems. These are facts. And so in my mind, it doesn't make any sense that we're like fighting against the idea of alleviating poverty and suffering and civilization because like people just need to be tougher. It sounds really barbaric, primitive, and insane to me how people think about things. I do think we do need to try, and we need to be like, we need to try, and we need to be driven. That's true, but not to the point of like making people suffer until they die. That's dumb.
Yeah.
That's
so
dumb.
how do you think we get there? Realistic steps. We know government is spoon-fed from industry. So the initiative's not going to come from them. It's probably going to come from people, private, petitions and stuff like that. But what's the first thing we fix, right? We've got healthcare issues. We have societal issues. We have wars and aggressions with other countries. We have inequalities, access to education, access to medicine. If you don't have the money, oh well, I guess you die. Like it's so multifaceted. Where do we even begin? What would be the first thing you would
Yeah.
change?
This may sound like oxymoronic. People think I'm a moron already, but you know what I mean, people. But I think it's simple. I really believe it's simple, and yet the idea is simple. The implementation is complicated. We do it today. We do it in the exact opposite direction today. This is where cyber engineering comes into play. The idea of not just using technology to help us make decisions and to structure society in a way that essentially helps to create a thinking in the population that moves towards a positive goal and aim, but like we do it now. We manipulate culture and society and people's thinking as it is. Football is a big deal in this country. People will literally fight. After a football game, there are riots. There are riots. This blows my freaking mind. But it's acceptable. Why? Because hey, we're Americans, or we're from whatever country, and we're doing it because we're passionate about the game, and yeah, it's acceptable. But a riot in support of social justice, or about I don't know, about people believing that their rights are being taken away, any kind of those things are seen as bad, right? Because left and right do this. They both fight for things that they believe in. Especially the right recently have been fighting harder for individual rights and for freedoms. They've been fighting a lot on Twitter and X. People on the left don't believe it's good to do that, but I think that each idea, left and right, they have ideals that they fight for vociferously. They're willing to die for them, or even in some cases, they're willing to kill for them. How do they get that? How do they get to that point? Because politicians are up there saying, "This is what you should believe in. Look at it this way. This is how I see it. Don't you agree? This is what's going to hurt you. This is going to impact you." They're manipulating people's thinking, but for their own purposes, not for the good of people. They're using people. They're getting them angry and upset at each other, not for the betterment of society, but just to stay in power and to keep and maintain the system that we have. Now let's change that. Let's change that same implementation of, if you will, structuring society to influence people to think differently by educating, by helping them understand the scientific method, by giving them facts and data to look at and say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what, if we do things this way, this will be the outcome. Versus, well, yeah, this is the outcome, but I believe it should be different. The way that we do that, the way that we transition, is through education, through advertising, through movies, through media, through whatever, commercials, everything that we do today to manipulate society into this state of chaos. Let's do it for something better. Let's do the same thing, but for truly a better future for us all. That's how we do it.
And I mean, as soon as they've been talking environment for years, right? Nobody really jumped on board. It took a long time, but now most people are genuinely concerned, right? They want to reduce their carbon imprint. They want to have less packaging and straws and stuff like that. So if you were a company that, let's say, made a product, but you said, hey, we donate certain amount of proceeds to help clean the oceans or whatever, you had some kind of sort of, anthropology behind your business, some people would support you because they respect the stance you took on that issue. They'd say, hey, this company and this company, well, this one's $5 more, but they're protecting the seals. You know what I mean? It's just an example.
Yeah, right.
But the point is that the only way that the company made that as part of their marketing initiatives and their advertisements and stuff like that is they saw, hey, there's a benefit here. There's an incentive for us. We will gain more customers and sell more product if we actually do something in that world of helping, because we know our customer base, data says that they would be stoked by that kind of thing, right? And it's the same reason a lot of companies support charities or the Santa Claus parade. Yeah, some of it is for business and tax write-offs and advertising. But again, it's an incentive that you can donate to the hospital. Yeah, they're going to give you that advertising. So if you're a selfish company, you're getting what you're getting. But who cares? Let them get it, because at least the benefit goes through. So until there is sort of that movement from people that say, no, I'm going to prefer companies and brands that support my ideals, and more of a wanting to know from the general public of what do you actually stand for, because your actions don't match your words and stuff like that. So I think until people, because for me, and I asked you the question of where do we start? What's the first thing we do? The answer to me is I have no friggin' idea. It's because everything is impacted. You can't change government because of how government interlies with everything else. There's no benefit for anybody there to no longer have a job or to have their main party supporter bail out or the rest of their constituents who support those companies. You're supposed to be leading them, but you don't believe in that product. But now, like, how do you go against that which your party says you're supposed to be for? Like, if you're a conservative, but you happen to have a cool liberal idea that could benefit, you're probably not going to bring it up because now you're going to be seen as less of a conservative. That doesn't foster communication and growth. None of that benefits the people at the end of the day. So until it comes from the general public that's looking for educated politicians that know the difference, that aren't just messing with our minds and playing with words, that are really going to be put to task or they're out, until we change all that. But, you know, for me, it's a very complicated thing. I like your idea about systems learning and systems theory of let's use AI in things that think above us. Again, I'm a human. My default answer, how do you fix this? I have no friggin' idea. Why not try AI? These are the issues we've created. What are some ideas that we can kind of toss around, debate, healthy conversation? Because it's just so interwoven what we've created. The people are conditioned to be used to that. So that's an issue in itself, breaking those molds and patterns. The government system, the healthcare system, the military system, the schooling, like everything is interrelated. I really can't see how this would start. I mean, it's got to be baby steps, obviously, but the technology's there and it's still not really going into this humanitarian aid. It's just being used to assist industry to make more money and do more business. And that's kind of what drives the whole system, right? It's money.
So I got a couple data points that I want to talk about here, and I want to respond to that because that's actually a really good point, and I have to speak to it because I think it would be appropriate. So the first thing that I want to say is, and these are some data points that I actually found. So humans process about 60 bits of information per second in any given focused task. Okay, but in contrast, AI systems like the IBM's Watson, which is it's like their AI, kind of like their AI, can process 500 gigabits. That's equivalent to about 1 million per second.
Yeah.
It's like 1 million books per second. Now, keep in mind, they can simulate reality. These AI models can simulate a problem. How do we fix it? And let's say they're like, how do we fix the problem of how do I tie a bow better? 400,000 of them are like, the most stupid, ridiculous ways to tie a bow you can ever imagine. Like, not even a child would be this stupid to tie a bow. But then that next one, right, is a good way to tie a bow. The next 1,000 is a better way. And then every iteration from that point doubles each iteration to the point where it ties a bow in a way that you couldn't even ever have imagined. And now it's like the perfect bow tie. And it does it all, by the way, in seconds. Seconds. That's the potential for these AI systems or AI models being able to solve problems better than what humans can. And obviously they need to be done in conjunction with us, because we don't want them to solve problems of their own. We want them to solve problems that we need solved, right? In the way that we want them solved. Like, how do we want this? This is the outcome, and they can imagine better ones that we can imagine. So that's how we want to do it. But I do think that there are ways. Now, there's another thing that you mentioned. It's like, how do we get to that point? Because look at what's happening. If you look at the way civilization is today, and I mentioned this about school lunches, how there are politicians who oppose that. There are politicians, and again, I don't want to name because I don't want people to get the wrong idea. There are politicians who oppose, like, they do things that hurt their own constituents, they call them. They're people, the people that vote for them. They literally harm them and then convince their constituents that it's best, not because it's better for them, but because the people that they're opposed to like that idea.
Right.
And so you shouldn't like it, not because it's bad, but because they like it. Okay, so obviously, with the system we have today, you're right. There's no freaking way we'll ever get to that point. There's no way. Not only is there no way, even if we propose that way, people will reject it, and that rejection will be supported by hundreds of millions of people. And if we're not all doing it, it's not going to work. But just recently, and I mentioned this before, there was Congress met with people in the AI industry, and they were talking about a global unified effort to come up with new systems for the world, because the AI is going to take such a pivotal role in changing society fundamentally for the good. Or if we don't come together, like, and by the way, all these nations that like Sam Altman and these AI people talk to, they're down for it, except for some obvious ones like China and stuff. They're down for it because they know the potential for good and bad. And if we don't do it, like the nuclear agreement, we're going to have some big problems.
Yeah.
So it can be done. It is actually being, and I'm not talking about the Venus Project, but the idea of using AI systems to improve civilization, it's being talked about today, doing it as a global civilization today. And there is opposition, and that's the idea of globalization. Like, there's a lot of conspiracies about the global elites. They're trying to eat us and turn us all into minced meat for their alien overlords, whatever the conspiracy may be. But we're already living in some pretty bad times. Like, you don't need alien overlords to eat us. We're eating each other, metaphorically speaking. And so I don't think that, it could always be worse, but like, it could be better. And if we're rejecting the better because we're afraid of things getting worse, it's going to get worse anyway.
Yeah.
Let's at least try to implement things that are better. I do see a way forward. The question isn't, is it possible? Is there a way? There is a way. The question is, will we ever adopt that way? I don't know. I have no idea.
That's like I said at the beginning of the show, we're either going to get there or circumstances are going to force us to get better.
Yeah.
It may not come down to Jacques' circular houses and city layouts like that. Although we do have some futuristic cities I'll get to in a few minutes here about how they're building them, design, the style, the function, very different from what we have, but very cool and very practical, right? So if they are going to do something like redesign a city, and like just in North America, Canada and the US alone, our infrastructure is at a point now where we have buried sewage pipes, water pipes. A lot of them are clay or iron. Those things only had like a 60-year lifespan max, and they're like 85 years old in some places now. So we are literally at a point where we have sinkholes popping up. Our roads are crumbling. The pipes are falling apart. There's going to be major infrastructure issues in all of the cities, which are, give or take a decade or so, pretty much the same age in our country. That's going to need fixing. So that's not just as easy as like just go in and replace a pipe. You're literally digging up your entire road. You're going to have to do an entire facelift of the full city. But part of that, these cities and how they work with everything involves like sharing resources. So you have kind of the library idea of, why does everybody need a stove?
Right.
One massive stove could cater a wedding with 500 people. So why do 500 people need stoves? Now, it's, again, different ways of thinking. It's like a hotel. It's kind of like communal living where there's one breakfast bar where they serve everything. Everybody goes there, but it works for the residents of there. People go in there knowing it's a little different setup. So they're not surprised when it's a different setup from home. But, and a lot of people say, well, the library idea doesn't work because people wouldn't bring it back. But if there's no value to you in having this lawnmower other than cutting your grass, like, I really don't want to pay for and own a lawnmower. If I could use yours for free for an hour, that would be amazing. Like, so there's a lot of this stuff. If you add up all the stuff in our houses, appliances, cars, redundancy, we don't really, certain things you need. I'm not sharing underwear with anybody, but like, why do I need a cake mixer, a Cuisinart stand mixer that I use once a year? Like, I don't need that in my home, and neither does everybody else, right? So the idea of sharing resources, I have a clip on that, but I know you got something to say, so go ahead.
There's a quote, that quote I want to bring it up again. It's, you will own nothing and be happy, is kind of is the fear that people have. But honestly, I kind of, and I'm looking forward to this video, by the way, this clip, because I'm curious about whether or not it's going to align with what I have to say next. Yeah,
so it was narrated by the same guy who narrated the movie Zeitgeist and Zeitgeist Addendum. Also, Jacque was inspirational in those movies as well. Did he co-produce those movies, or?
Yeah, so Peter Joseph is the guy who made the Zeitgeist movie, the Zeitgeist documentaries. There are 3 of them. Zeitgeist Addendum, which it brought me to tears by the end, but I'm like that. And then Zeitgeist Moving Forward, which again was very emotional for me too. Because of the potential for our civilization. But Peter Joseph made those documentaries. The first and second one, he collaborated with Jacque Fresco to make to implement his idea. Like, what's the solution? The first one was, what's the problem? The second one, what's the solution? Right? How do we fit? And it was Jacque Fresco's The Venus Project, which is a completely separate organization. So Peter Joseph runs the Zeitgeist movement and the Zeitgeist documentaries. Jacque Fresco runs the Venus Project, along with his partner.
Okay, so let's check this out. Resource-based economy. Here's an example of how it would work.
Person would simply come in, take the item, use it, and when finished, return it when it is no longer needed. Sort of how a library works today. In fact, these centers could not only exist in the community in the way we see local stores today, but specialized access centers would exist in specific areas where often certain goods are utilized, saving more energy with less repeat transport. And once this demand tracking system is in order, it is tied into our production management system, and of course into our resource management system, hence creating a unified, dynamically updating global economic management machine that simply makes sure we remain sustainable, starting with securing the integrity of our finite resources, moving to make sure we only create the best, most strategic goods possible, while distributing everything in the most intelligent and efficient way. And the unique result of this preservation-based approach, which is intuitively counter to many, is that this logical, ground-up, empirical process of preservation and efficiency, which can only define true human sustainability on this planet, would likely enable something never before seen in human history. Access abundance. Not just for a percentage of the global population, but the entire civilization. This economic model, as was just generalized, this responsible systems approach to total Earth resource management and processes, designed again to do nothing less than take care of humanity as a whole in the most efficient and sustainable way, could be termed a resource-based economy. The idea was defined in the 1970s by structural engineer Jacque Fresco. He understood back then that society was on a collision course with nature and itself, unsustainable on every level. And if things didn't change, we would destroy ourselves one way or another.
All these things you're saying, Jacque, could they be built with what we know today, or are some of these things, are you guessing based on what we know today?
No. All of these things can be built with what we know today. It would take 10 years to change the surface of the Earth, to rebuild the world into a second Garden of Eden. The choice lies with you. The stupidity of a nuclear arms race, the development of weapons, trying to solve your problems politically by electing this political party or that political party, that all politics is immersed in corruption. Let me say it again. Communism, socialism, fascism, the Democrats, the liberals, we want to absorb human beings. All organizations that believe in a better life for man, there are no Negro problems or Polish problems or Jewish problems or Greek problems or women's problems. They're human problems. I'm not afraid of anybody. I don't work for anyone. No one can discharge me. I have no boss. I am afraid to live in the society we live in today. Our society cannot be maintained by this type of incompetency. It was great, the free enterprise system, about 35 years ago. That was the last of its usefulness. Now we've got to change our way of thinking or perish.
The horror movies of the future will be our society, the way it didn't work. And politics would be part of a horror movie. Lots of people today use the term cold science because they're analytical. And they don't even know what analytical means. Science means closer approximations of the way the world really works. So it's telling the truth, is what it is.
I love that freaking dude.
He gets so fired up, talks so fast, you could tell. It's just like, ask him and he's going to let you know.
That was sped up, just to be clear. He does talk fast. He did talk fast.
I think
when
that
he was younger,
because it's an older video, I don't think the transcript was done properly. It was a little quicker, but.
So that documentary was, I'm sorry, that interview was Larry King in Jacque Fresco, 1974. Keep that in mind. That's like a long time ago, 50 plus, about 50 years ago today, which means these ideas are not new. And you mentioned this earlier. This is not a new idea. This is an old idea. It's just one that hasn't been brought to the limelight. It's kind of been, I guess you could say, buried in the course of history. So there was a couple things he said that really, all of it got to me. But the one thing that I loved, because I used to think this, it changed my perspective about problem solving or about problems. What problems we have? He said, there are no Negro problems. There are no, liberal problems. There are human problems, right? There are obviously problems within each subset of differences among human beings. But ultimately, they're all human problems. Like, humanity has a problem. We have all these problems as a human race. And thinking about them in such a divisive, compartmentalized way is one of the biggest reasons why we have so many issues. When people don't see each other as equally human, that's when that's kind of what brings about a lot of issues we have when it comes to conflict amongst ourselves. Every time I hear someone say something like, oh, you know, this group of people is inherently bad. And they may not say that explicitly, but they suggest it through the language they present when they talk about a person or a subculture or whatever. Um, you realize they're not only dehumanizing these people, but they're also separating their humanity from the opposing people or the subset of people from their own. Guys, we're all human beings. We all do literally, we all exist the exact same way. We have the exact same needs. We all have there is no difference. The only difference is where we grew up in a culture, and the difference is we concoct within our different societies and cultures. But ultimately, there are no real differences, and that's why using the scientific method to come up with solutions and to view the world is a better way of living than the alternative, which is what we have today, which is ideals, belief systems, and political positions.
Yeah.
So,
and again, if we think that those are their problems, quote unquote, other people's issues, I liken it to, there's a town about 45 minutes away from where I live, used to be like a nice, quaint farm town. For whatever reason, there were areas of like downtown Vancouver that had people with serious addiction issues, some high crime and stuff like that. They were literally giving people free bus tickets to go anywhere but here. And a lot of them got transported into this small farming community. And for years, everybody turned a blind eye on what was happening there. These people are homeless. It's like an open market selling drugs and all that, kind of like Portland, Oregon was, at the height of things, where like you literally look and there's people, doing drugs and, intravenous needles on the side of the road. And then 3 blocks away, it's like Tiffany's jewelry and stuff like that. And you're like, how are the rich right here? And these people have absolutely zero. And they turned a blind eye for years until that problem, them, became their problem. Now they're smashing your storefronts, vandalizing your cars, robbing your houses, because that inequality was left just unchecked. It was left to become poisonous and fester. And what you thought was somebody else is really now your issue, one way or the other, whether you like it or not. And it's way worse. The suffering is way worse. The death toll is way higher. We have a pandemic issue with opioids all over the world at this point. But for years, everybody turned a blind eye. It's not my problem. That's them. That's other people. They don't raise their kids like we do. And then it became everybody's kids and your neighbor, your friend, anybody you know, for no rhyme or reason. Poison is poison, right? It doesn't always, the people don't always choose the affliction. Sometimes it's just bad circumstance, bad luck, whatever. But having the mindset of it's not us. Like if you lived in a small country and there was opposing factions on either side of you, you're remaining neutral, like, hey, it's not my business, but you allowed those poisons to fester. Now they're shooting each other over your country and you're getting the fallout in the middle. So remaining neutral sometimes is taking a stand, and not a good one, because you're allowing things to happen that you don't agree with, that you see are wrong, but you didn't say anything, and neither did anybody else. And I'm not saying that everybody has the equal opinion to say, well, it's my way, not your way, but everyone has a right to say what their opinion is, and it's all to be, considered. I'm not saying there's never going to be agreement. Like you mentioned before, there's teachers saying the kids shouldn't eat. I'm not suggesting giving those people the keys to the kingdom. What I'm is when people get rid of that baggage that they had in their life, and this is generational now. So I don't know that it can change in a less than generational way. Same thing with terrorism and things like that, indoctrination. People are the byproduct of their environments, their upbringing, their good or bad,
the food they eat,
all that, right? So when you come from a system that's screwed up, and you're taught that that's how it's supposed to be, and you're taught that these are the things you should be chasing, and then you chase them and they don't bring you happiness, and then the food doesn't bring you health, it brings you sickness and illness, and everything goes to hell. At some point, somebody's got to wake up collectively as a group. Many of us are awake, but we're either not making noise or we're not organizing effectively. We're not getting the message through to government, industry, big companies that, hey, if you want our business, you want our attention, it needs to look more like this. So for me personally, I think it is a bigger problem than any group can solve. The Venus Project can become millions of people. It's still not enough to affect that change. People need to literally realize that we have this bubble around us that was put in front of us, right? And we have biases, we have traumas, we have baggage, we have things that don't make us good thinkers, good observers, good opinions, because we have this kind of poison within us. So we need to work on ourselves. We need to get more inclusive with other people. And only then can these discussions actually bear fruit. Because if you go into a conversation or a debate about future technology, if I inherently disagree with you on every level, I'm just going to disagree with you on this too. So we're not going to get anywhere unless we become better thinkers and better speakers. And so first it starts with us. Again, you can't fix your neighbor's issues, but you can fix yours. So I think it's the human condition that needs to improve. Then these things will happen. But I mean, keeping it status quo, everybody just going about their day, not making any noise about this, not, you know, that's not going to help for sure.
So we all know about Freudian psychology, right? Where like your subconscious mind, and I had to take notes before I wanted to keep up with some of these points. But Freudian psychology, you know, they talk about the subconscious mind and how you're underneath the conscious part that you're thinking about all the time, or when you're making decisions or doing something and you're aware of it. There's a consciousness that you're unaware of, at least in a vocal and an attentive way. It operates a lot of times through feeling, impulses, desires, and things like that, right? That's where the kinds of ways that you think and believe about the world, they manifest themselves through through your behavior. And a lot of times you're not in control of that. I mean, almost all of it. And as I mentioned before, corporations understand that. They use subliminal, and this is going to sound so, this is like doing the whole UFO thing, right? I hate doing this, but I'm just going to you got to think about this here. When Pepsi was flashing, like in a nanosecond or whatever it was, when you're watching a movie, they would flash, or Coca-Cola would flash Coca-Cola real quick. You didn't see it, but your brain subconsciously perceived that Coca-Cola, it would influence people to want Coca-Cola. This was done back like decades ago. They were doing
it with popcorn too. Eat popcorn, and then everybody in the theater would eat more popcorn,
right,
because the message hit
right,
their subconscious.
The same thing happens with human manipulation in any way. Hypnosis, for example, repetitive things can manipulate someone into being more likely to do what or think what you want them to, and believe what you want them to. So hammering something over and over and over again, involving an emotional response, like showing imagery and music and entertainment and things that push towards the thinking and feeling that you want. All these things are ways to manipulate the human being. And this is what you mentioned earlier, like even I said this briefly, but even the food you eat manipulates you, because it's helping to produce, and I don't mean helping in a good way, it's facilitating this like production of chemicals that are actually toxic to your body, bad foods that you eat, but they're easy to get at the grocery store and cheaper than healthy foods. You think that's an accident? It's obviously not, because all of it is designed. I think we literally have a society that is designed to keep people stupid, angry, and easy to manipulate. It's true. Yep. And when you're angry, you're stupid. When people are emotional, they're stupid. And when I say stupid, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, literally, you think less intelligently when you're angry. It's a fact. You produce chemicals. You zero in. You lose that ability to observe things from an outside perspective. You don't have that. It puts you in a place of fight or flight, and necessity for these impulsive behaviors and thinking. We will never get there if we keep allowing these kinds of influences in our own psyche. And you mentioned this, the change in the human condition is the only way forward. It's I don't know. I mean, the only way that I can think of, like meditation and becoming more aware of yourself and how you feel and think. These are ways that I think are how we could ever move forward, if you will. I guess if all civilization were to meditate and become more aware, self-aware, we would never be able to be manipulated by anything that we didn't want to. But unfortunately, it's easier for us to be manipulated because we have a society that is designed to keep us this way, so that we don't make better decisions. We make the ones they want us to.
I think Jacque summed it up best by sort of talking about what is significant. What do we apportion value and time and effort, and like, what is the actual significance of that task or that thing you're doing? You give it so much time and so much of your resources, but if you really step back and think, like, why am I working this dead end job that I hate? Like, who am I doing this for? It's not for me. So, you know, asking those questions, getting self-reflective. But I got a little clip here from Jacque on what is significant. So let's check it out.
So people don't know what is significant. If they meet Einstein, they say, gee, can I have your autograph? But they wouldn't say, what do you think I ought to know to help me think as well as you? Do you know what I mean? A guy says, there's too much noise in this city. Do you have a noise abatement system? I said, no. Are you working on it? No. Then I'm not interested. A noise abatement is some method of eliminating noise. And I think otherwise they're just complaining. It's too bad there's so many airplane crashes this year. What do you suggest? I don't know, then shut up. Is that clear?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes, everybody's really interested in what I'm talking about. They understand it. I don't say anything to hurt people. I say things to make them aware of how little they contribute. Nature tends to simplify or generate certain patterns of behavior. Nature does generate certain patterns of behavior. The ability to extract that which is significant and less significant is not common. And that's where science and semantics comes in. It gives you more of an ability to extract from nature that which is significant.
Yes.
And that's what is lacking in the world. The ability to select. The brain doesn't have that, only experience. If you touch a certain plant, your fingers itch for 3 days, you memorize the pattern of that plant because you have a reason to. And you say to other people, stay away from that plant. Where do you get it? You got burned by it. Now, some people might say, I wonder if that plant's good for anything, and they might try different things with it. And after a year's study, they can't find anything. But somebody else finds out that that plant that itches kills the malaria mosquito. That's later.
How important is it for groups of people to, in your mind, to think completely differently to the other one? Because I mean, it's quite important for everybody to think differently.
I don't think it is.
Don't you think so?
No, correctly, not differently.
Because
appropriately. Do you know what that means? Thinking appropriately.
Yes.
If you live on this world and you can tell me all about another planet, I'm not interested. It is not appropriate. It's not appropriate for you to tell me there are particles beyond the electron if I don't have any need for that. I don't hear it. Do you know what I mean?
I think I know what you mean. A lot of information is
how we relate to the earth and one another.
Now, to me, that's intelligence.
And maintain.
Is working out what is relevant and what's not relevant.
Yes, that's what we have to do. What is relevant to human beings at this time? Not 100 years from now. That would be different. What is relevant? There is lots of information out there, but a lot of it is superfluous to your need. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
I know a person that can name every crater on the moon.
Yes.
To me, that's superfluous, unless he's planning a journey to the moon.
Yes, you're right.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay.
Yes. Well, when I was younger, I memorized all the Latin names of all the fish because I used to go deep sea fishing with my dad.
Sure.
And it wasn't very.
I understand.
It's not very useful to me now. Yes, no, you're right.
There was some scientist that wrote a book called Don't Ask People What They Want, Tell Them What They Ought to Want. The Indian says he wants the blessing of the High Father that has ascended into heaven. That's not deliverable. The things he asks for are irrelevant. What the Indian wants, he doesn't know, to maintain the best of health and the widest, better understanding of the world around him. So when you say some people are scientists, some are not, they don't know what they're talking about. Everybody is scientific, and they use the best tools they have.
Yes.
but that they may not be adequate. That's a problem. So people say, I like intelligent people. And you say, well, who's intelligent? My uncle, he made $40,000 this month. Well, his standards of what is intelligent is different than yours. You understand? The word intelligent could mean different things in different contexts. So that's why our language is so terrible. It doesn't have common meaning.
So
Man, I got
a lot
that.
there, but it's
Yeah.
true. It's the things that we apportion our time to, the things we feel are important. Like the guy saying he can name every crater on the moon. Well, how does, I mean, I'm bad for that. I have a well of useless information in my brain. I think it's a byproduct of how our brains actually work. But
Hmm.
if I spent that time, I don't know, reading encyclopedias or something, I would have
Right.
more usable knowledge for something that is on my purpose rather than just kind of out there. So, and what would be the need to learn all those craters in the moon unless you were planning a journey there, right? So, apply yourself, figure out what is important. Why does this actually matter? And is it worthy of my time and resources? I think we spend a lot of time as a culture and society just spinning our wheels, doing mundane stuff, doom scrolling, stuff that will never bear fruit. It's
Yeah.
negative. It's
Yeah.
giving us mental conditions, depression,
Yep.
anxiety, or making them worse, if anything. Maybe they're not the catalyst, but they're certainly not helping either.
They could be exacerbating it. So this actually is an idea that I've had to deal with within my own self, because I used to get so frustrated with like mundane conversations, small talk. It's like frustrates the crap out of me. I feel like there's so many things to think about and talk about. Why are we talking about these stupid, simple, like, like, oh, what's the weather like today? Oh, it's been great. Oh, well, last week I talked to Sally, and Sally, who cares? What does this have to do with anything that's going to improve my condition, like my condition or yours even? People are mostly just ranting and venting about things that emotionally carry them through their day to day. I had to deal with that because I think that it's important to listen to people and to have those conversations, because you may be able to influence them in a positive direction through that conversation in ways that you didn't, like if you didn't give them the chance to vent and talk about those what seemed like to you irrelevant topics, you never reach them. So at least as society is today, you can't think like that. However, because you have to be able to listen to people that you don't want to, like, their ideas and in the way they think and feel, even if you don't agree with or you're frustrated with those ideas or think they're irrelevant to anything. But in a future society, I can imagine that those conversations would dissipate. They wouldn't be there. We would focus more on maybe they would be less not only relevant but less less talked about, or maybe they would be this sole thing talked because there's nothing else to talk about. All of our problems are solved. And now all we can talk about is last week Sally did this and I don't know. I personally don't like them, but I do understand the necessity for them as society is today. Another thing I kind of disagree with him on that a little bit on that. I think we should listen to people. Another thing is, again, I think at least with this point, there are discoveries that we find out about certain things scientifically that we can kind of use them in other areas to improve efficiencies, in processes, just because even though they don't directly relate to, I don't know, one process or another, the maybe the process of like, a subatomic, energy transfer, whatever, information processing in the DNA, those kind of things may seem like they're irrelevant, but ultimately they do produce results in other areas of scientific discovery that we would never have found if we didn't look at them. I disagree with that. I do think we should look at all these different ideas, no matter what they are. I do think we do gamble, like with our scientific endeavors. For example, I find it extremely frustrating to just like, I don't have a problem with animal lovers. I love animals. We all do. Not all of us, but you get what I'm saying. But why do we care more about animals than people? You're a person. If you were an orphan who was sick or if you were in an impoverished nation dying from thirst, and people said, I think that it's a better cause to go after to fix the stray cats in freaking Las Vegas. you wouldn't be your existence would be squandered. It would be gone because somebody thought that it'd be better to worry about cats in Las Vegas than your existence in whatever nation. They have the resources, they have the ability, they have the time and all that to help you, but they don't like people, they like cats. If you were the person in that situation, your life would be snuffed out. And I think that we're not thinking about the humanity, we're not empathizing with other humans. A lot of people empathize more with animals than they do humans. That frustrates the crap out of me. I don't see a benefit at all in loving animals more than people. However, I do see the utility of emotionally, especially emotionally, of loving an animal and inviting them into your family. Just not over helping human beings. I can't see that. And there are a lot of things like that that I don't understand why we're doing them. Why are we focusing more on, for example, studying things that improve the efficiency of the current system versus finding new systems that improve the systems that we have today? Why not find better ways? A lot of times because they don't have immediate benefits. And so, yeah, there are some things I agree with. There are some things I disagree with his comments on that one. But ultimately, his idea of also NLP, human communication is terrible. Neuro-linguistic programming and general semantics, I studied them a lot, and I think that they are sure ways for us to find better ways to communicate with each other. The problem is, again, it's culture. Culturally, people talk differently from culture to culture. Within a city, you can find entirely different cultures within one city. And vernacular and ways of talking about things. And I think that if we found a more scientific way to talk about things, we would come up with better ways of communicating, which would kind of eliminate a lot of these conflicts we have in communication throughout our society, our civilization.
Yeah, and also what's customary too, right? Like in Japan, they have lots of customs. If you go into somebody's house and leaves your shoes on, they're going to get extremely offended that you did that, right? And you might not even think anything of it until you realize that, yes, culturally they believe that. So we communicate the way we were taught, the way we know, and what's based on our belief system. Sometimes that crosses the line. And to your point before about, we talk about the weather and my back's sore and this and that. I think that's a byproduct of the baggage everybody's carrying and that little bit of social interaction and therapy, if you will, that we don't maybe necessarily have anybody else to talk to. Neighbor might be the only person speaking to that 80-year-old lady who's all by herself, who doesn't talk to her kids or doesn't have kids or whatever. It's what that person's needing in that moment. That is sort of the root cause of sort of, why we do the things we do. But again, that's why I mentioned before, I don't think you can solve this in a generation. If we are a hurting population, we're not just all of a sudden going to be able to find out what makes us feel good and get inspired to give our time and energy and effort to other things that will make others feel the same way. If we're all battling our own demons, everybody's head is down. Nobody can really take care of anybody else because they can't take care of themselves, right? If you're hurting, you got to deal with you. You can't fix your neighbor. So until it gets to a point where we all, believe abundance is possible, believe that we are equally valuable and important, until we genuinely believe that, and then treat others the same way, so that our actions now match that belief, until that becomes more normal than not, we can't even talk about advanced cities. But there are some advanced cities. I don't want to miss this in our time allowance here. I'll just go through them quickly here. These are some of the cities of the future. Some you folks at home may have already seen or heard of, but they're either giving preference to sort of biodiversity or space arrangement or convenience or the lack of needing transportation. It's dealing with things like the trash that is produced from a city. These are literally organic molecules they are building, basically, right? These become their own creatures in whole. So this is the line in Saudi Arabia. A lot of people have heard about it. It's 170 kilometers long. It's basically a city in a skyscraper. Have you seen this before, Marquise?
Sorry, I muted my mic. I thought you were going to play a video. I have seen that. I don't know a lot about it though. I didn't read a lot of it. It's one of those things you come across. You're like, that's cool.
It's supposed to house 9 million people, 200 meters wide, 500 meters long, has its own built-in transport system. You could go to either end within 20 minutes. So it's basically was designed as an alternative to most current urban layouts. But this also is a futuristic city. It's called
a lot of these cities. I got a question for you real quick. Aren't a lot of these cities it's even like in Dubai, I believe Dubai has one. I think there's another one in Japan. They're creating like an ocean city that's supposed to be
Yeah,
futuristic. And a lot of these cities, from what I understand from
that's
my
this one
research,
here.
that they are only designed, at least for now, to house scientists and researchers and engineers to work towards solutions to create to kind of further these city developments. From what I understand about them, unless something has changed.
Yeah, I think it depends where. I mean, there's a lot of different initiatives, a lot of different companies for some people. I mean, look at Dubai. They've been very, they put a lot of emphasis on architecture and amazing, crazy cities, under ocean hotels, the tallest building,
Yeah,
skyscraper
yeah.
with a roller coaster on the roof. Like it's as
What the-
crazy as you can get,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then some. But the reason they did that was sort of marketing for the city. Come here, we're progressive, we're open-minded, we do things like this. If you're sick of the same old back in America or wherever you're living,
yeah,
this is the future of cities, right? Let us show you that example. And
yeah.
they're using it as a marketing strategy. This is a concept from a company called Big. It's called Telosa. So it's some Danish architect designed it. So basically, it would house 5 million people. Um, yeah, that's about all you can say. Again, I don't know much about this particular one here. Again, it is designed to have like a monorail around it. I
Yes.
find that building up is popular in a lot of these places. The footprint doesn't go this way, it goes this way. We saw Jacque Fresco talk about the circular city. It's almost designed like the Pentagon, where you don't have to go A to B and back and forth. You can literally shortcut through anything, and the distances are much shorter just based on layout, right?
Yeah.
Here's one in Malaysia. This is called biodiversity. So it's
Clever.
biodiversity in Malaysia. Again, this is landfill. This is using space that they don't have on the ground. All the flat land is occupied. The mountains are very steep and uninhabitable, I should say. So the idea here being using these small little islets, string them together, landfill them together, bridges, whatever. And yeah, it's kind of like a lily pad was the theory for this one here. This would house between 15,000 and 18,000 residents. There would be autonomous transportation, so no cars. I don't know what that would look like if everybody would have jetpacks or not, but I'm pretty psyched about that.
I mean, they do if miners can do it in Brazil.
Exactly. This is the future of Cairo, Egypt. This is the new capital city, theorized to be, who knows when it will be produced, but it will serve as the new capital of Cairo. 7 million people in order to relieve the congestion in the current capital city. This was produced by SOM Architecture. And this project is over 700 kilometers. And it's one of the, basically it's an urban park. It's not designed with a city in mind. It's designed like an organism. It needs to live and breathe and have fun and do all that. And so I guess their mentality being that if we make a city that behaves the way people want to live, this city will thrive and be, and here's one in Mexico, the Smart Forest City. This is being designed by an architect from Italy. 557 hectares across, 130,000 people, plant-covered homes, produce a more sustainable way of living, water recirculation, things like that. And the design comes from sort of the Mayan heritage. So they're keeping within what's common to them. It's almost like a land tattoo. They're building something that's going to be cool. It's going to be a statement of who they are as a people. So very much inclusive of culture, not let's build a pod that doesn't resemble anything that we've ever seen or believe in. It's all about, using what they have. This is Amaravati in India. Again, a concept. That sort of needle top building would be the government building. Everything is laid out in there's like channels and canals going through everything. So again, transport, communications, everything. It's designed to work with itself, even like water tables. It's crazy. This one is in Canada. I'm Canadian and didn't even know such a thing was being discussed, but this is the Orbit, it's called. And it's designed to take a farming town from a population of about 30,000 to 150,000. And again, it's agrarian based. So rather than seeing our typical plots and squares of farmlands from the airplane, where it looks all half, eroded and sandy, this was a way of, crop rotation and the way of letting nature and plants and everything work as an ecosystem, filtering the water, all that stuff, and being obviously zero carbon. That's a big thing. Another one again in the Maldives. This is a floating city. So this is expected to be completed by 2050, so not that far away. But essentially, they're reclaiming land from the ocean and taking tiny little islands that aren't really usable and somehow connecting them in a usable way with infrastructure and everything else. Again, a lot of countries have population issues. That doesn't really solve the food, but I guess if you bring people together now, it's sort of the rebuilding of civilization the way it was however long ago. We were hunters gatherers, figured out that we pool our resources, we can get further ahead, grow more food, have more security, more stability. It's kind of what they're doing now. They're taking nomadic people that are living on stilt houses in the water and giving them a sustainable way to live and do their thing, right? This is a Chengdu future city in China. Notice how many layers each of those buildings have. They look like rice paddies that are grown on layers. In fact, they may be rice still growing on the roofs of these structures. But effectively, this is housing, food, commerce, recreation, everything you need all under one roof. This is a concept for Nevada Innovation Park. This is actually some crypto mangate. What's the guy's name? Jeffrey Burns. But this is supposed to be an ecosystem that runs strictly on people and cryptocurrency. So I don't know how I feel about the non-inclusivity of the fact that you need to be in crypto for this thing to run. It still has a monetary system. It's not a resource-based sharing. This is just a small version of what we're already doing. And two more quick ones here. One is Akon City in Senegal. That looks pretty awesome.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Sort of like a Shangri-La in the desert there. And then the Woven City in Japan. Again, this one is using mountain peaks that wouldn't normally be inhabitable. But all you need is sort of a flat base. You can now then build on top of that base. And everything is there, right? Communal living, shared living. It almost looks like a bunch of hotels with little shuttle buses going in between them. So again, why does everybody need a car if transportation is figured out? You only need a car if transportation is poor where you live. But people in New York or Manhattan will rather take the subway than a car because the traffic and parking situation, subway is actually the better way to get around. So once, technology gets to a point where the new way is actually better than what we had, then people will adopt it and accept it. So, we do go for that shiny little cookie when it's dangled in front of us, the species, right?
This is kind of like, this is the point of contention. And we haven't talked a lot about the controversies and there aren't many controversies, but like the opposition to this. Talk a little bit about it sprinkled throughout this conversation, but personal individuality, like your ability to do what you want when you want. Like we believe we have a lot of choice. We can go buy a car if we want to. We can go to the store, get whatever we want to. We can have as many boxes of cereal, as many types of steak. We can buy shrimp. We could get anything we want to. We get anything we want to if we can afford it.
Yeah.
When you think about the way that rich people live, they don't even think about cost or ownership or any of that stuff. They have what they want when they want. They discard it whenever it's not useful. They have it sitting around whenever it's not useful, but they can do whatever they want whenever they want to. Imagine being able to live your life like a rich person. I mean, I'm talking mega billionaire. You could go on a trip.
Take the yacht, take the Ferrari out.
Whatever you want to do, anything you want to do, you just don't have it sitting there doing nothing but collecting dust. But you can do anything you want to. Imagine that. First of all, and you said this, when civilization is redesigned to better fit, to better be optimized for providing for and giving, and having the people's needs met without having to strive for them, our motivations and desires will change. I mean, if you don't want or need anything that in terms of food or clothing or housing, your motivations change. The things that you want changes. And of course, obviously the way that you see the world and what you believe changes. I think that that another way forward is to start by providing people with the things that they absolutely need. Food, housing, obviously electricity, things that you need to stay warm and things like to make your foods and stuff like that. Things that you need. If those things were provided for, the things that you want would change. Also, your suffering would be reduced dramatically. You wouldn't suffer. And if you live in a society where those things are provided for, where your children don't have to think and worry about those things, I guarantee people would have no problem volunteering to do things to keep things the way that the way they are, especially if your children are provided for. You don't go to a community imagine having a small community of 1,000 people, and they're like, listen, not a cult people or 1,000,000 people. Like, hey, listen, there's a city you can go to where you don't pay for housing, you don't pay for food, you don't pay for clothing, you don't pay for education, you don't pay for all the things that you want, like to just live and be happy and have education, things like for your kids. You don't have to worry about that stuff. The only thing that we ask you don't have to do this. We just ask you to participate an hour or two once a day for 3 days a week. Would you do it? Would you be like, absolutely not? I love working 16 hours a day at a coal mining. Nobody's gonna. I mean, there may be some people who say, let's do it. But I bet if there was just a small community of people, 1,000,000 people or so, that has that, it would grow exponentially to the point that everybody would want to be a part of this civilization. Everyone would be. And all the motivations within these civilizations would gradually spread in like an infection, but for the greater good of all humanity. That's actually what Jacque, he talks about. He says that if we had one city to demonstrate what could be possible, it would just change everything.
Yeah. And once one place gets it right, starts gaining momentum. And I think that will be ultimately how it starts. People will see a success on a small level and go, see, look, it worked for city planning. Let's try it now with healthcare or with, governing or whatever the case. And we're going to keep this conversation going on our Quantum Club. We're coming up on 2 hours for this episode here. We want to keep it under the 2 hours for our UNX Network YouTube channel. We want to be respectful of the next show, but we will keep this conversation going at least another half hour, 40 minutes. Again, link is in the description. Quantum Club. I think it's what, $15, Marquise?
Yeah,
nothing crazy, but it does help support the show. Keeps us commercial free, so we don't have to run ads that drive you guys nuts. And that's a nice way of saying thank you. We appreciate what you're doing. And shouts out to Scott Rosen, our latest Quantum Club member. Love you guys. And we'll see everybody next week. We're going to have another fantastic episode, and we'll see our Quantum Club members in the after show coming up shortly after this. And with that, I will bring today's show to a close. Thank you again, Marquise, and to the late Jacque Fresco. Rest his soul. We appreciate his contributions to humanity. His ideals will live on and move forward. And we're proud to talk about that on Quantum Ladder Podcast. So with that, everybody, take care of each other, and we'll see you next week.